Hello, this is Vicki Leroux with Modern Jewelry Creators. Today is a hands-only video because we are doing a wire tutorial, and so we need to be close up on the camera, and then I don't have to do hair and makeup, so it's a win-win for everybody. So in celebration of St. Patrick's Day, I guess we're going to do a little clover-like component and clasp. I tend to think of it more as an infinity symbol, but I guess it's not. I guess it really is more of a clover. The components that I've made and the clasps that I've made and used are a little more wider, I guess, on the side. So instead of having 4 petals exactly the same, mine are a little bit wider, and so they have worked really beautifully for like this little earring component. I think is gorgeous, but also as a 3-strand bracelet here or necklace. But I've loved it for this bracelet. This is our little project we do for our wire 1 clasp, where we can do wrapped and basic, but then this little clasp, and I think it works beautifully as a 3-strand clasp because, like I said, the side loops are a little bit wider, and then one side has the clasp. So I'm going to show this today as a Infinity Clover component and clasp variation. So I will show you a couple different ways to get the shapes, and then do the component and then the variation for the clasp, because I just think it's a gorgeous piece to work with. I did want to look up some other tutorials that were on YouTube, and I did find a couple that just show how to make the little clover and like link it together as a clover link. You could definitely do that, but I really think personally that it's just a really beautiful component on its own to kind of dress up and decorate, and I think it's worked beautifully for these projects. So however you want to use it is just great. So I'm going to move this out of the way and maybe keep a couple of these up here to show some different shapes and variations as we do them. Okie doke. So we need, for pliers, we need all the usual suspects. Round nose, chain nose cutters, and then if you have it, a nylon jaw for wire straightening. If you don't, it's not a big deal, but it's surely helpful. And a ruler is probably helpful as well. I'm using a German silver, 20 gauge German silver. That's half hard. All true German wire is half hard. If you're using a dead soft wire, so on the package it should say if it's dead soft or half hard. We don't want to use a dead soft. We need the wire to be half hard in order to have the resistance to hold the shape. If you use a dead soft wire for these kind of projects, it won't hold. It'll keep falling apart, and you'll think it's you, but it's not. It's having a half hard wire. And I love a German silver because it's better than just a plated type of wire. German silver is plated with sterling silver, but it's also plated 10 microns thick. So imagine like 10 platings. And again, it uses sterling silver and not just a silver color or paint. And that goes over a very small copper core that is nickel and lead free. And so it's a beautiful wire to work with. It holds its color beautifully, doesn't chip. And it is quite a bit less expensive than sterling. So it's a fantastic wire, I think, to learn on and practice on. We sell the ounces on our website for only like $6.50 at this right now. So it's a really good deal. So I'm going to cut off 5 inches of wire for this. And just, again, for reference, my clasps here, that's about 1 inch long, about a 1/2 inch wide. So I'm using a 5-inch piece. So if I wanted something larger, I would use more. If I wanted it smaller, I would use less, etc. The first thing I want to do is straighten this wire. And you could use your fingers, but for a half hard wire, if you have a nylon jaw that can straighten this, it would be better. You'll get a nicer, straightening to it. But like I said, you can use your fingers. You can straighten dead soft with your fingers, but it's hard to do with half hard wire. Okay. But if you don't have that plier, just do the best you can with your fingers. It's fine. Now the other thing you might want to do with your round nose is I've made a little Sharpie mark on the place that I want to make sure to use on my round nose when I'm working with it to guarantee I get the same size each time. And so most round nose pliers, when they are manufactured, have a 1-inch nose, right, that's smaller at the tip and gets fatter towards the box joint. I've marked this with a little Sharpie at about the 3/4 inch place. You could use chalk if you wanted to, or something else, but I do find it's really helpful. So on our 5-inch piece of wire, I'm going to put the plier in about the center, right? It doesn't have to be perfect, but about the middle, and then make sure we're at our Sharpie mark. And I'm just going to take both sides and fold them up and over. And you want to be careful that with this hand we're not squeezing or squishing. It's a natural tendency to want to do that, but all you're doing is squishing and marring and flattening the wire. So I just want to be aware of it. So I've crossed this over to make a little teardrop shape. The more I pulled these sides down, the more round it would be. So it just kind of depends on the shape that you want, but I'm going to leave it kind of like this little teardroppy kind of shape. And then we also have like a V here. So I'm going to next work on the wire that is on my right hand side. I'm going to line up my plier at the point that has the Sharpie mark. But as far as the length up the wire, we want it to be about the same length as that teardrop. So if you can kind of visualize where the tip of this teardrop is, that's really where we want your plier to be. And if you really want to measure, my guess is this is about a centimeter in length, and you could then measure it here to make sure your plier is about a centimeter up, but roughly the same, length as that teardrop, because we're making the teardrop loop for the other side of it right now. So I want it to be as close in shape as we can. So I'm going to roll this halfway and hanging onto this loop in my hand, but then I'm going to, when it's about halfway, I will grab this tail and pull it onto the shape of the plier. Whoops. Pull it onto the shape of the plier to complete my shape. And now we have a little figure 8, or maybe more traditional infinity, symbol. No, it's hard to see with that white against white. Here's my bench block. You can kind of see it that way. So another thing we want to be aware of is that if those two tails are on the same side, right? I've got one wire here, and if I turn it over, both my tails are laying parallel to each other. On the other side, that's what we want. So if you're looking at yours and you have one tail on one side and one on the other, we want to just move it so that we've got the two tails laying parallel or right next to each other, right? So the next side we're going to do is the shorter side, right? One is longer and one is shorter. So I'm going to use the shorter loop. I'm going to line that plier up where the little Sharpie mark is, but I'm going to also line it up on the wire at the tip of where this pedal is, or this loop, right? That's where I'm going to put the plier. So that really helps. It gives you where you want to line it up on the pliers and where you want to line it up on the wire. But we want to do the same thing. I'm going to roll it halfway and then use my fingers to pull it, the shape onto the plier to complete that little loop. And now we've got a little, it was like bow, I guess, looking shape right there. Got our 3. And this is kind of what I was talking about before. I tend to make them where the sides are a little bit wider. I think it's just a nicer looking component, but you could definitely have it more round, like a 4-leaf clover, by taking, when we first did that cross, by pulling that down a little bit more so it was a little more round. You would get more of a round shape. So the next thing we're going to do is actually cut the short tail, and I'm going to cut it so that it's falling almost right like in the middle where everything's crossing. I just want to cut that off right there for now, and we'll just leave it. And then we're going to do the last loop with our longer side here and do the very same thing. I'm going to line it up, the plier up where the end of that loop is, and then also on the plier where the Sharpie mark is. I'm going to roll her halfway and then pull the plier around the wire around the plier to complete the shape. Okay, beautiful. Then I'm going to cut that little tail again, and be careful that you're not only cutting that wire. Now, before we get in there and kind of play with it and tuck those tails down, I'm going to hammer, give it a little bit of a love tap that you'll find kind of flattens it down a little bit. Now I'm going to get in here, and where we cut those, I'm going to cut this one down a little bit shorter, but I'm going to tuck the ends so they're kind of in that, where that wire is going across the top and then the tails across the back. I'm tucking the tails kind of in between those so that now when I feel both sides, there's no sharpness, there's no ends, right? The little tails are kind of tucked in the very center. And then you can kind of look at the shape if you want to, you know, finesse the shape a little bit more. You can do that. And when you're happy with, which I will do a little bit, then when you're happy with the shape of it, then you want to get in there again and give another little tap to harden that down. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hang on to these little sides, the sides that were wider. Whether you've done that or not, you want to hang on to those first little sides. And you could use pliers. I'm using my thumbs, and I'm just going to give it a little bit of a twist. And it's almost like just like this to kind of give it a little bit of a curve. And all that's doing is kind of that taking more of that single wire that's on top and making it kind of hug the intersection. You can see it a little more in this one than I did. And it curves it down and almost kind of, like I said, hugs or gets around the center of it a little bit and hangs onto it really nicely. I'm going to tuck this tail down a little bit more. Okay. But you can, you know, I make a lot of them, and then I find a couple that match the best if I want a pair of earrings or whatever for the for components, or if I'm linking them or what have you. Okay, now let's do the clasp part. So that can be the one side of the clasp, and then you need the hook side, right? So I'm going to cut another 5-inch piece. And do just about everything else the same. Right, I'm going to start in the center of that piece of wire. I'm going to bring them up, cross, cross. And again, this is where I could pull those down a little further to have more of a round shape. Then I'm going to go over on the wire that is on my right hand side, line that up with the Sharpie mark, and about the same length of that as that teardrop is. I'm going to roll it halfway and then pull the tail under. Be careful not to squeeze too much so we don't flatten it. And then if I want these normally to be the pretty even or pretty equal, so I may, you know, play with it or adjust it if I need to right then. We want to make sure the two tails are crossed on the same side, right? There's the two tails. Two wires are laying parallel to each other, and the other side is just a single one. Gonna take the shorter end to do our last loop. I'm gonna line that up on the Sharpie mark and at the tip of that loop on that side. So for a clasp, I like this end one to be a little shorter, but if you wanted it longer, you could bring the plier out a little bit more. I'm gonna roll it halfway, and then I'm grabbing onto that wire and pulling it onto the shape of the plier to complete it. So I've got that little kind of bow shape. I'm going to cut that tail. That shorter tail off. Okay. Okay, see where it's there. Now, for the clasped side, which is what we're going to do here, I want to line it up at that Sharpie mark on the plier, but where if I was just doing the loop, I would line it up the same like length of that loop, so I know they're even. But because I want the clasp, I'm doing the clasp, I want it a little bit longer. So I'm just going up a smidge, like a half a centimeter or so. Or I mean, let's see, where's the centimeter side? Yeah, like teeny bit. Just going a bit further, and you can adjust it, of course, later too. But another thing that I want to do is I've got these 3 loops. I'm gonna put my chain nose pliers over these, and or you could use the nylon jaw as well. I just find the nylon jaw gets in the way when I go to do the loop, but you could cover it. And I'm just trying to be able to hold on to all this. You could also use your fingers, but I'm going to turn halfway, just like we did before. I'm going to pull this wire onto the shape of the plier, and this time I'm going to make sure that little tail is coming in front, is falling in front of it. So, right, and there's the tail of it. So the next thing we need to do is make the little bend, right? So in the clasps, there's a little teeny bend at the very end of it, right? And so I'm going to use my chain nose pliers, and I'm going to grab onto the wire right where I want that bend to be. So almost at the middle point, almost, but not quite, a little bit higher. I'm going to grab on to that point and just give it a little bend or tweak, right? Again, I'll try to use well, you can see it's my sweater maybe. We're going to give it a little teeny like bend right there. And then I'm going to cut it right at that point too. Whoops. Right, and so from cutting that, then I've got that little hook. So at this point, before we get in there and play with it, and all or adjust things around, I'm going to give it a little love tap to get a little hardened up. And then now we can get in here if we need to. You want to close maybe that little loop where you cut the tail off a little bit more, or if I want to, I don't know, I want to move this up a little bit and even it out. You know, whatever you want to do to, you know, adjust it and tweak it so it's looking good. Then when it's at that point, you're going to give it a little tap again. This hardens the wire. You don't have to do it very hard. It really hardens very easily. And then the last thing I want to do is that little twist. So I'm going to use the side that has the 1 wire, not the one that has the 2. And I'm going to grab them both sides and give that little bit of a twist. And see how it almost curves up a little bit. It just creates, with that 1 wire on the top, it just creates a little hug to the center, I think. And I think it lays really lovely too. And I think it really looks very pretty when it's done. Isn't that lovely? So I'll use one side as the, you know, the other side of it, and that side is the clasp. So either way you do it, I think it is really beautiful. It just takes practice. You're not making them on a jig or with a machine, it's by hand. So, you know, make as many, you know, as you need to get a pair, and just play with them and get an idea of what shape you like. But I think it's a gorgeous component. Now, I'm going to leave a link below if you want to sign up to receive our email list. We don't do a free email list like most companies or most people. We've always charged for our emails because we include a lot of new designs and more of a blog style information. So if you want to join our newsletter, our Bee Club newsletter in email, it is only $1 a month. The bonus right now is this handout to make this tutorial. So it's step by step with all the photos. If you want to get in there and receive that as a little free gift, as well as a coupon code, I'll just leave a link down below for it. But that is it for today. Thank you so much for joining me. Until I see you next time, even if it's just my hands sparkle brightly like the star that you are, I will talk to you very soon. Mwah. Peace.